The AMD Radeon RX 6500 XT available on stores starting at $169, with third-party versions of the graphics card obviously going up from there. AMD has assured us there will be plenty of cards available at this MSRP, but only time will tell, as retailers will be free to raise prices depending on the demand, as we've seen with other graphics cards this generation. Because AMD isn't releasing its own reference design of this GPU, like with its more high-end RDNA2 graphics cards, we're not sure which version of the graphics card will be available at the $199 base price. So, it's probably best to shop around a little bit with what little time you have before the stock is gone, because prices can go up drastically these days. Our advice would be to get a version of a card that's as close to the $199 MSRP as possible, mainly because of the vast difference in performance against the Radeon RX 6600. And, if you see a Radeon RX 6600 that's close in price to the version of the 6500 XT you're looking at, you should just spend a little extra and go for the Radeon RX 6600 instead. In normal times, this wouldn't be the case, but with pricing the way it's been the last couple of years, anything goes right now. Although the AMD Radeon RX 6500 XT is significantly less powerful than the RX 6600, it is still based on the RDNA2 architecture and brings all of AMD's next-generation features to the budget graphics card segment. While it has features like ray tracing and smart access memory, this GPU doesn't handle the former very well. The closest card in AMD's current lineup is the Radeon RX 6600, with 28 compute units, or 1,792 SPs. This is a pretty significant drop, and when combined with the lower memory bandwidth, it makes the RX 6500 XT a much weaker card. Combined with RAM and 16 MB Infinity Cache, this memory bandwidth is approximately 231 GB per second. What helps this card stay competitive is that it has access to all the software features the rest of the AMD RDNA2 lineup has. The most important thing here is Fidelity Super Resolution, FSR, which is the key to ensuring this graphics card delivers consistent performance, even in the most demanding games. This is a very solid solution and gives the Radeon RX 6500 XT the ability to actually turn on ray tracing in games like Far Cry 6. Usually it's a slideshow due to lack of raw processing power. AMD is also working on a driver-wide solution called Radeon Super Resolution, RSR. This is an easy-to-enable system-wide setting that allows you to upscale any game from a lower resolution. In our tests, the graphics card reached a maximum output of around 80 watts. This requires approximately 50% less power than the Radeon RX 5500 XT to operate. Both of these cards perform similarly, but this means you can run the Radeon RX 6500 XT on a low-powered PC. This may be of interest to those who want to throw a graphics card into their desktops without cards. PC This means less cooling demand, and you can find many low-end Radeon RX 6500 XT GPUs, which are perfect for very small PC cases. Because the AMD Radeon RX 6500 XT is such a low-power card, you likely won't find many versions of the GPU that are much bigger than 5 or 6 inches long, and they likely won't have much in the way of fancy cooling. The Gigabyte Radeon RX 6500 XT Eagle 4G we got in for review is around 5.5 inches long and only has one 6-pin PCI power connector, making it an easy choice for anyone with a small case that needs some decent graphics horsepower. But while the graphics card is short, it's still more than sufficient at keeping temperatures low. In our testing, we only peak at around 62 C, which leaves plenty of thermal headroom before it will ever start to thermal throttle. As for ports, there are only two, one HDMI and one DisplayPort. It's kind of disappointing that this graphics card doesn't get the same amount of ports as the RX 6600, but it kind of makes sense. After all, this GPU doesn't really have the power to run a ton of displays anyway. The AMD Radeon RX 6500 XT is designed for 1080p gaming, not high-end gaming at that resolution. This graphics card can handle most games, but you'll need to tweak settings to hit the sweet spot of 60 FPS in the most demanding games. Games like Metro Exodus and Cyberpunk 2077 are good examples, where you'll likely be closer to medium settings than extreme settings. In most games in these areas, the Radeon RX 6500 XT's performance was quite impressive, beating the massive 60 FPS in Forza Horizon 5 and Far Cry 6, even with FSR set to equal close. However, The card struggled in Metro Exodus, reaching only 51 FPS with ray tracing. Even though this is a powerful GPU for ray tracing, changing lights in Metro Exodus illustrates why you need to think twice about it. You only get high resolution and ray tracing at 18 FPS. So even if it's a graphics card, we don't recommend turning it on. Don't see what it looks like before turning it off so you can play. One interesting thing about this card is how it compares to the previous generation AMD Radeon RX 5500 XT. The 8GB RX 5500 XT also costs $199 and can match or beat the Radeon RX 6500 XT in most games. The ray hunting name is different because RDNA graphics cards do not have ray accelerators, but with the limited hardware available, it's a good idea to buy a second Radeon RX 5500 XT instead of the RX 6500 XT, especially if you can get it at a good price because you can't. They lost a lot of job opportunities.